After booting, we arrive at the Unity desktop. We could also have booted directly to the installer. However, the Unity desktop does allow us to do a few useful things. For example, we can adjust the font size if the text was too small to be easily read. We can also get the network configured. A connection to the internet is required to install Ubuntu. Usually the installer will automatically configure the network for us. Sometimes we have unique hardware or other installation details that requires a manual configuration. At the top of the screen is what is called the panel. The panel provides status information for running applications and other useful information. At the left side of the panel are the running applications. In this case we see screenshot because I took a screenshot. To the right side of the panel are indicator applets. These can be icons that indicate a specific status, or just plain text, for example, the current time. We can also see notifications here. Notifications indicate that something has happened, or we need to take some sort of an action. The icon with the up-down arrows is for the network manager. The icon shows the status of the network, whether the computer is connected to the network or not. Clicking on the icon allows us to configure the network. We also see the current time. At the far right is the action icon. We get a menu that allows us to do various system kinds of things. For example, we can adjust the system settings. We can log out, reboot the computer, or shut down the computer. At the left edge of the screen is what is called the launcher, a vertical column of icons for our favorite applications. Clicking on an icon will launch the application. Later we can add or remove icons here to better suit our needs. For now, Ubuntu provides us with the default set of icons. The topmost icon is for what is called the dash. How we launch applications not included in the launcher. The dash will give us a nice panel full of icons that we can click on to launch other applications. To install Ubuntu, we left-click on the installer icon. This is the second icon down in the launcher, or there is also an icon on the desktop for the installer. The installer window will appear after a short delay. We now see the window for the Ubuntu installer, or Ubiquity as it is called. At the first step for installation, we select our language. English is the default. If English is your preferred language, simply click the Continue button to move on to the next step. Notice that there is a back button at the bottom of the window. At most steps in the installation, you can click the back button and return to the previous step. There is also the Quit button. Whenever you're unsure or uncomfortable continuing with the installation, you can click the Quit button. This will abort the installer and return you to the desktop. Several steps into the installation, there will be an Install Now button. Until we click that button, we can use either the back or the Quit buttons. Up until we click the Install Now button, nothing will be written to the disk. Nothing will have been changed on your computer. Okay, let's proceed here. Verify your desired language is selected and go ahead and click the Continue button. Here we are at the next step in the install process. At this step we verify a couple of things and answer a couple of questions. At the top, the green check marks indicate we have met the requirements for installation. First, we have sufficient disk space to install. It shows we need at least 5.9 gigabytes. Second, we are connected to the internet. During the installation process, some software needs to be downloaded from the internet. Most software is included in the disk image file we downloaded previously. Since that is sized usually to fit on a CD, some software simply doesn't fit, so we need to download it. The first question we are asked is whether we want to download any updates while we are installing. Over time, the software packages that are included with Ubuntu have updates to fix bugs or add features. Often this can be as soon as 24 hours after the version was released. Closer to the end of the 6-month life of the release, a majority of the packages will probably have updates. If your internet connection is slow or unreliable, you probably should leave this one unchecked. You can do the updates later after the installation has completed and we boot up Ubuntu. Sometimes I prefer this simply to get to where I can boot sooner and leave this one unchecked. Otherwise, we have to do the updates sooner or later, so we might just as well let the installer do the updates for us. I would recommend checking this box so you don't forget to do the updates later. Second question we are asked is if third-party software should be installed. In particular, usage of MP3 requires a software license because MP3 technology has patents. Fluendo takes care of licensing and makes MP3 available to the Linux community. Also covered by this are things such as firmware for some wireless Ethernet adapters. This question is asked primarily for legal disclaimer reasons, to notify us that some software is separately licensed from Ubuntu. If you don't agree with those separate licenses, you can leave the box unchecked and not install the software. I usually recommend checking this box because it doesn't harm anything to include the third-party software. Not having this third-party software might cause annoyances later. We can always install the packages later, but that can be a nuisance too. Okay, to complete this step, verify you have both boxes checked, or if you prefer, not checked. Then left-click on the Continue button to proceed to the next step. Normally, you won't see this warning and question dialog pop up. However, if you manually mounted a disk partition or are installing from USB media, you will see this dialog. Simply, the dialog warns that disks with mounted partitions cannot be altered. You won't be able to create, delete, or resize any partitions on that particular disk drive. If alterations to partitions on the drive are necessary, then we must allow the installer to unmount partitions. If we are using a USB pen drive as our installer media, we must answer no here. It is always safe to answer no, but the installer may fail if we alter partitions in the next step. At the next step, we are asked which method the installer should use for installing Ubuntu. Here the method determines how the installer chooses which partition to install Ubuntu on. There are 3 methods available. The first and default method I like to call the Play Nice with Other Kids method. The installer will attempt to install Ubuntu alongside other operating systems that may already be installed. For this method to work, you will need at least 5.9 gigabytes of free space on the disk drive, space that isn't allocated to any other partitions. This can be convenient and a relatively safe way to install Ubuntu. The second method is the most dangerous. I call this one the megalomaniac, I'm the only OS in the world method. You know who I'm talking about. I never use this method and I don't recommend you do either. We are also given the option to encrypt our Ubuntu partition. A password is required to gain access to information. This protects against others accessing your information even if they have access to your computer. Unfortunately, if you forget your password or there's an issue with the disk drive, you probably won't ever be able to access your data either. I recommend against using this option. Another option allows using LVM or Logical Volume Management. LVM is most useful for data partitions. LVM is not really needed or recommended for the Linux system partition. Unless you really know what you are doing, this option can get you into trouble. I would recommend leaving this option unchecked. The final installation method is something else. We manually select which partitions are used for installation. This is the method I use and the one I recommend. This method takes more effort on our part and has more potential for us to blunder. However, in the end, there won't be any surprises. It will install Ubuntu where we told the installer to install Ubuntu. We can also review the partitions that already exist. We can create, delete, or resize partitions as we need or want. In short, we are given full control over our partitions. As recommended, the something else method is selected. Double-check you have the method selected. Then click the Continue button to move on to the next step, where we will do the partitioning.